Hi everyone, my name is Martin Koehring. I'm Senior Manager for Sustainability, Climate Change and Natural Resources and the head of the World Ocean Initiative at Economist Impact, which is part of the Economist Group. Thank you to the Dubai municipality for the opportunity to speak about food sustainability at the Dubai International Food Safety Conference. So I'd like to speak about Economist Impact and the Sustainability Project, in particular the Food Sustainability Index. So I will talk about what it measures, how it measures it, the key metrics, the key findings from the G20 index, and a snapshot of country performance in the Middle East. So first of all, what is the Economist Impact? So Economist Impact is part of the Economist Group that also produces the Economist newspaper, which is known for rigorous independent reporting, explaining today's world and seeking to discern tomorrow's. And then we have Economist Education, which provides courses led by expert practitioners, giving individuals tools to advance their careers in a globalized world. And then we have Economist Intelligence, which is a subscription service with access to data, analysis, and forecasting to guide informed decisions. And finally, we have Economist Impact. And we're very excited that recently we launched Economist Impact, which combines the rigor of a think tank with the creativity of a global media brand, providing insights, innovation, and influence designed to empower businesses and organizations to catalyze growth and change in the world. And we're also excited that recently we launched the Sustainability Project, a flagship initiative of Economist Impact. And it has 5 pillars: net zero and energy, resilience and adaptation, circular economies, ecosystems and resources, and social sustainability. And food sustainability, of course, crosses over many of these themes. It's really a cross-cutting issue. You can find out more about how we cover food sustainability on the Sustainability Project at impact.economist.com/sustainability. So let's talk about the Food Sustainability Index. So since 2016, the Food Sustainability Index has come a long way. When it was first launched, we covered 25 countries. In 2017, we expanded this and had a more Mediterranean focus. And in 2018, we expanded it further to cover many more countries, including in sub-Saharan Africa. And we focus on global best practices. And this year, Economist Impact is expanding the index to cover 11 new countries, meaning that the FSI in 2021 will have the broadest coverage yet, covering 92% of GDP and 92% of the global population. This will help to make the FSI a truly global tool that is critical for stakeholders of food sustainability across the world. So what is the Food Sustainability Index? So it measures the sustainability of food systems in 78 countries across 3 key issues outlined in the 2015 BCFN Milan Protocol. And in 2021, the index contains 38 indicators and 95 sub-indicators that address societal, environmental, and economic themes around food sustainability. Economist Impact has created this index with the support of the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition Foundation. You can find out more at foodsustainability.eiu.com. I mentioned earlier that this year we focus on the G20 countries, with Italy being the chair of the G20, and also food sustainability really being a center and a central theme of the G20 agenda this year. And of course, we had the first ever UN Food Systems Summit this year, and also COP26 highlighting the importance of the climate conversation and how food systems link to that. And the full index, as I mentioned, will be launched in January 2022. So what are the 3 pillars of the index? So the key components of the food system are covered in these 3 pillars. So first of all, we have food loss and waste. I mean, about 1 billion people suffer from hunger, but a third of all food that is produced is lost or wasted. Food loss and waste is, of course, rapidly moving up the policy agenda. But it's really critical because food waste corresponds to 4 times the amount needed to feed the people suffering from undernutrition worldwide. It's a critical issue, an often neglected issue as well. And then we have sustainable agriculture, the second pillar of the index. I mean, the impacts of climate change on our agricultural systems are becoming more visible and increasingly difficult to estimate. Although agriculture has the potential to capture greenhouse gas emissions and help mitigate the impact of climate change, the environmental impact of agriculture is actually growing. The shift away from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy, for example, biofuels, reduces the surface of land available to grow food even further. And I mentioned already that COP26 and the climate agenda It's really important, and the link with food systems is absolutely critical. And then the third pillar, nutritional challenges. I mean, the hungry and the overweight coexist, and rising rates of obesity strain healthcare systems to the point of economic unsustainability. For every person suffering from undernutrition, two are overweight or obese. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences on public health and the economy have really highlighted how important it is to address nutritional challenges. So if we now look at the three pillars of the index, food loss and waste, so we look at food loss. It's one of the subcategories, and this really focuses on post-harvest loss. And then we have the food waste indicator is focusing on end user waste. So this is household, consumer, and retail level. And then sustainable agriculture. So we have three subcategories here. We have water, land, and air. And finally, nutritional challenges. And here we have three subcategories: life quality, life expectancy, and dietary patterns. And this year, of course, we wanted to make sure that we capture the latest trends in food sustainability and key themes, for example, around resilience of food systems. And this is, of course, critical with the COVID-19 pandemic highlighting, how important it is to have, sustainable supply chains, and, food systems are critical in terms of building resilience. And then, of course, we have the One Health approach, which is a holistic approach that brings together different aspects of health systems, and food, of course, is a critical aspect of health. And then food affordability and availability, and these are critical issues, again highlighted also by the COVID-19 pandemic. Looking at these disruptions that happened that impact the food supply, and also affordability issues around food prices. And then we have the planetary health diet and other sustainable and healthy diets, such as the Mediterranean diet and the Nordic diet, really in the spotlight. And then we have policymakers looking at ways to make food systems more sustainable, and food-based dietary guidelines are absolutely critical in that respect. So we cover these as well in the index. And then we have, already mentioned that climate change mitigation and adaptation are crucial. I mean, this year highlighted by COP26, and also, the climate crisis has been in the spotlight, and looking at food systems and how they are a part of, the climate issues, but also the solution to climate change is absolutely critical. And then we have societal issues as well, and we have issues around inclusion and diversity, and gender equality, for example, is a critical issue that is part of the FSI as well. And then finally, animal welfare is also a critical issue that we cover among the many issues in the index. And I mentioned the G20 really was our focus this year, given that the G20 is such an important group of countries, large economies, also very influential economies, and of course, I mentioned the food sustainability was high on the agenda this year when Italy, chaired the G20, and also with the first UN Food Systems Summit happening this year, and COP26 as well. So a critical year for food systems. And if you look at the key findings from the index, looking at the G20 countries, we can see that the countries performing best in the G20 FSI in 2021 include Canada, Japan, Australia, Germany, and France, that they perform generally well across all three pillars. These countries combine strong outputs with robust policy responses. You can see how countries are performing on this slide. One example to pick out in particular is Canada. Canada performs very highly on food loss and waste. It has a strong policy response to the issue, but does particularly well when it comes to its levels of food loss and its supply chain approach to reducing it. It also performs well in the air category on sustainable agriculture, due in part to its strong policies in place for climate change mitigation and adaptation. We found that while lots can be learned from the G20 countries, there is still much room for improvement. So let's look at the first pillar, so food loss and waste. In terms of the policy response on food loss and waste, we have considered the Champions 12.3 framework of Target, Measure, Act, as it has provided a simple structure for countries to follow. We found that the vast majority of countries are addressing food loss and waste in national strategies, and the majority of countries have targets in place. On food loss, the most ambitious target among those with comprehensive plans is a reduction in food loss of 50% by 2030, which is shared by Argentina, Australia, Canada, and the US, and is in line with SDG target 12.3. When it comes to food waste, 3/4 of the G20 countries have set reduction targets. But across all countries, there's a lack of information on how often progress against these targets will be assessed. Furthermore, measuring is hard. Obtaining national data on food loss and waste is challenging, in particular because it is often difficult to identify where the farm gate stops and where the next level of the supply chain starts. And because a lot of business and consumers don't know how much food they are wasting. So aggregating this is difficult. There's also an uneven distribution of data between regions as well as country income groups, but some progress is being made. For example, the EU has taken reporting and measuring seriously, though progress has been slow. In order to give countries opportunities to change and to measure food loss and waste, countries can look at examples. So, for example, in the UK has been able to measure its reduction and waste effectively because it funded a domestic NGO called RAP to establish a way to measure loss and waste. And RAP has been able to achieve these measurements and these measurement goals by spending money on primary bespoke research to understand sector estimates, combined with scaling up ongoing data collection processes by working with local communities and businesses. So while measuring may be hard, it can be the first step of progress, as awareness of how much food is being wasted can drive action. So more must be done by countries to report their levels of food loss and waste. Lastly, on the action phase, while across the entire G20, there are private and academic institutions working on food waste, only half these countries have the right food waste legislation in place. So more action is needed to get the right legislation passed. So now if you look at the second pillar, sustainable agriculture, one area where we have looked at particularly this year is what we have learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has made the consequence of unsustainable agricultural policies and practices much clearer. Issues around biodiversity, deforestation, and the rearing conditions of livestock have grown in importance, given the links shown between damage to the environment and the ability of zoonotic diseases to jump from animals to humans. More needs to be done by all countries to improve their performance on relevant indicators, but particularly those countries that are performing poorly on a number of these indicators, such as Brazil. And finally, on the third pillar, nutritional challenges, one aspect we have looked at closely this year is the affordability of a healthy and sustainable diet. The challenge of shifting G20 populations to a healthy and sustainable diet is enormous. And a major barrier is affordability. The Eat Lancet Commission itself has estimated that the planetary health diet, and this is an attempt to take account of both nutritional and environmental requirements, is too expensive for 1.6 billion people around the world. The findings of the EFSI are in agreement, and we have seen that the healthy diet costs almost 20% of the daily per head gross national income in India, the highest in the index, whereas the average among all other countries is just under 5%. But the problem of affordability is not just confined to India. Other countries have limited affordability, and in many instances, this has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Globally, 370 million children have missed out on school meals due to COVID-19. For governments, the challenge will be to identify the primary drivers of the costs of nutritious foods, be it lower levels of productivity, weak and fragmented supply chains, inadequate access, changing consumer demand, or an unconducive policy environment. Governments must then craft their responses accordingly. And one thing we do when we analyze the FSI, and with this year as well, is looking at how the FSI compares with other global benchmarking tools and indexes and other measurement tools around the world. And we looked at many different of these, and two of these we looked at is the Sustainability Development Goals and the Human Development Index. And we can see that there's a correlation there. Progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals and progress towards human development correlate with the FSI, and this makes sense to us. And if we look at all the three pillars of the index, food loss and waste, sustainable agriculture, nutritional challenges are all connected to the SDGs, and this really highlights the interconnectedness between our food systems and progress towards achieving these goals. And now let's look at the country performance in the Middle East. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to release the full index early next year, but we can already give you a snapshot of the results for the Middle East. So the Middle East performs slightly below the average in the 2021 FSI. So if you look at the average score for the Middle East countries, it is 60 compared to 62 as the average score for all of the countries in the FSI. But of course, there are lots of divergences and lots of differences when it comes to country performance in the Middle East. And we have divided the FSI scores in 4 quartiles, with the best performing quartile, the 4th quartile, and then the 3rd quartile, 2nd quartile, and the worst performing one, the 1st quartile. And we've identified these here in the color code from green, amber to red. And we can see here that that Cyprus, Israel, and Turkey are in the 3rd quartile. So they perform relatively well. I mean, they perform above the FSI average. And then we have in the 2nd quartile, we have Egypt, Jordan, and the UAE. And we have one country in the 1st quartile as one of the worst performing countries, and that's Lebanon. But you can find out more about all of the different indicators and the performance of the different countries on the website foodsustainability.el.com. Currently, the G20 countries are already there, and as I mentioned, early next year we'll have the full index for all of the 78 countries. So now, as I mentioned, full index will be launched early next year. Have a look at the website, foodsustainability.eu.com. We have the G20 index there. We have blogs there with infographics, lots of great data, a global map where you can click on the countries. You can download the full Excel spreadsheet with all of the different metrics, you can compare country performance and so on. And of course, tune in and stay tuned on the Food Sustainability Index, because we're going to release the full index results very soon. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.